I'd like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that we are in Treaty 1 territory, the home and traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, Innu, Cree, and Dakota peoples, and in the national homeland of the Red River Métis. Our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation in Treaty 3 territory. I'm Linda McFadden. I'll be chairing this hearing today, and I'm joined by Lynn Nesbitt and Richard Whitbread on Zoom. Our assessor is Nathan Kupfer, and our recording secretary today is Belen Rojo. We'll be hearing applications for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that are made at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by Council and is independent of it and the City Administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of King's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I'll confirm the points of appeal with your property to be addressed with each applicant before swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony, followed by questions that the applicant may have, and the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have the opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all of the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The session will close after all applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decision. You'll receive the board's decision by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. We'll be hearing items 1 through 7 on our docket today. Ms. Romo, will you please affirm the assessors and the applicant's testimony?
Mr. Assessor, please state your full name.
Nathan Kupfer.
And you affirm the evidence you about to present at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Mr. Applicant, please state your full name. And you affirm the evidence you about to present at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
Okay. We'll open with the first item on our docket, which is 648 Notre Dame. I don't believe there are any preliminary issues on this one. So Mr. Kupfer, will you please go ahead?
This is file number 22-1256, roll number 1305-0388100. The street address is 648 Notre Dame Avenue. And this is an owner-occupied TD Canada Trust bank location. It's constructed in 1961. It's all on one story, total leasable area 5,637 square feet. That's actually spread out between the main floor and the basement. So I'm showing here we have about 3,400 square feet on the main floor and then about 2,200 square feet in the basement. We'll get to that in our income stream here. Like I said, constructed in 1961 without any major renovations or additions here. We've only got 2 years added to the effective age. And we've got a model-driven assessment here for 2023 of $927,000 that I'm going to be recommending be maintained today. If you scroll to page 2 of my brief, you can see some photos of the property. We are right on the corner of, this is Notre Dame, right on the corner of Notre Dame and Sherbrooke. So it's a pretty well-trafficked corner here. Like I said, owner occupied by TD Canada Trust, so we have no rents in place, and we're looking at comparables for this property. Page 3 of my brief shows we have no recent sales for the property, and like I said, no subject property leases. Page 4 of my brief, I've included a sample size of bank rents here. Spread out pretty well over the city, different ages, different sizes, just kind of so you can get an idea of what we're looking at. We also have two other banks on our docket today that are on McPhillips that do have net rents in place and make for fairly good comparables as well. So in looking at our sample size here, I pulled 8 comparables. We're looking at an average of a little over $26 a foot, with min-max between $18 and $36. I'd also point out 2 of these banks are 2-story banks, so that rate and that square footage is going to be a little bit lower, generally for 2-story banks, as the value for the second floor is going to be lower than the value for just the first floor alone. So this is the sample size I've pulled for you for today. All the properties on our docket are bank dockets. I haven't added or removed any comparables here, so we're staying pretty consistent. I've also represented most of these properties to date at the Board of Revision for this cycle now, so I'm pretty familiar with them. Page 5 of my brief has the subject property income breakdown. So like I've said, we've got the area here split between the main floor and the basement. So the B1 Bank Credit Union area there is being modeled at $20.71, which I would say is undoubtedly on the lower end for what we've seen for our bank comparables. And we're also adding just under $4 a foot for the substandard basement area. This would be effectively storage area for record keeping and that sort of thing. It's not leasable office type area. So that's why it's being modeled at $4 a foot. The total of that is 5,637, like I said, total leasable area. Everything here is model driven. I haven't touched any of these variables. This is going to be consistent today. 2% vacancy, 3% expenses, and an $8 shortfall, I believe, is going to be for every property on the docket. And then we've got a 6.75% capitalization rate for this building, which I think is reflective of the age, size, and location. What we're looking at here, 1960s building, it's fairly well located. It's going to get a medium to higher medium cap at 6.75. There's also another adjustment you'll notice of $184,592. So this property is a bit unique today. None of the other properties that we're handling has this. It doesn't quite have enough parking. You can see on my page 2 behind the bank there. However, there's a parking lot located just behind it that is also owned by TD, and my understanding is it's operated by the bank. It's part of one economic unit, so we've agreed to effectively remove the value of this parking lot from the income stream, and that's where that deduction of $185,000 is coming from. And that's how we end up with our estimated market value using the income approach of $927,000, which I'll be recommending today. The income and expense mailer was returned for us. Like I said, it's fully owner occupied. So we have nothing but expense information there. And the COVID questionnaire, it doesn't look like was really, they did fill it out. Just saying that they incurred some additional costs for cleaning supplies, plexiglass shields, that sort of thing, which is pretty consistent with what I've seen from other bank properties for 2023. So this is what we're looking at for this property. Like I said, $927,000 is the modeled value. I believe it's quite reasonable, and I'm going to recommend that it be maintained. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any questions for the assessor?
Thanks, Madam Chair. And with your permission, some of the questions will be common, specifically relating to capitalization rate, common to all the matters. So I'd ask that the questions and comments be carried forward, if you might, just to save a little bit of time.
Perfect. Thank you.
Ms. Cuffer, thank you for your presentation. Very straightforward. Perhaps just looking at this particular property, and there'll be some other ones, the capitalization rate is the most significant difference in our respective valuations. So, and you've mentioned it, the cap rate on your page 5 of 6.75%, that is model driven, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And the capitalization rate, the department hasn't provided you with any specific transactions as to how the ranges on your page 7, the conclusions in your chart, as to how those cap rates were calculated or the properties that were included, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And we are we can agree that this is one of the older properties, I believe, on the docket. It's a 1961 build, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, quick question on your page 5, and this is minor, but I'm curious. The deduction that we've both made for that associated lot, I have the value for 2023 at 191,000. This is just a wee bit of a difference of about, call it $6,500 on your deduction. Was there a reason for that difference, or? It's minor, but just because we're a little different on it, I thought I'd ask.
So for 2023, Mr. Reimer, I believe you have the correct number here at 191,000.
Okay.
I would hypothesize that 184 was last year's or last cycle's number that was carried forward and not adjusted. Okay,
I kind of thought that might be the case. So, okay. And again, not a significant, because our rents are actually virtually the same, but we can agree on, just briefly on your page 4, the bank, the second last comparable at 235 Marion, that would be both in terms of the timeline between that lease and the reference date and the age. That would be the most comparable with respect to those two factors for this property only. Would that be fair?
With what's showing from this comparables list, yeah, I would agree that that's the closest in terms of age and location.
Okay. Madam Chair, those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any questions, Ms. Nesbitt?
Again, just at the cap rate, just looking at your table on page 7, I guess.
Yeah.
There's not a specific cap rate for banks. So do you look to the office cap rates? Is it most similar to office, or is it retail that would be more comparable? I'm just trying to get a sense of where your 6.75 might fit within this table.
Oh, that's absolutely a fair question. In my experience, I would compare them best to office type properties. They do contain offices generally, banks, as well as, of course, that high-end retail type component finishing, like you typically see within a bank in that area. I've only reviewed 2 cap rates for banks personally since I've been doing this. I don't have it part of my presentation, but in my opinion, they are fairly consistent with lower end office rates. The 6.75 in this case puts us kind of in the middle, which, based on the fact this is a 1960s building, might not seem appropriate. If I were coming into this with a fresh set of eyes, Madam Chairman, I would say the rent probably is a bit too low here, and the cap rate is probably a bit too low here. You'd probably be looking at a net rate of $26 to $28 if this got rented, and you could probably cap it around 7 to 7.25. So you would see a shift upwards in the rents and a shift upwards in the capitalization rates. Kind of if I was coming into this with a fresh set of eyes and doing the appraisal instead of what we've got here that's model driven.
And just to follow up to that, does an increased cap and an increased rent go together? Like, can you have that lower rent and an increased cap, or are you saying the two are sort of part of the same analysis that you were looking at with fresh eyes if you had to?
Yeah, so our model produces the assessment, and of course it's the assessment that's under appeal at the end of the day, right? So
correct.
When I look at a property like this, you look at the rents and you look at the cap. I try not to adjust one just in isolation. I say, if the cap is low here, I have to look at the rents and say they're also probably low. So if I were to assess this, if this were to be rented out, I would say it would probably get $26 to $28 a foot net minimum, and then you'd probably be looking at bumping that cap a bit because it's an older building, kind of into that 7 to 7.25 range.
Okay.
Kind of how I would see it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cupford. No further questions, Madam Chair.
Mr. Whitbread.
Sure, just a bit of clarification, if you don't mind, on the parking situation. So if I look on page 2, the top photo, I see your red dot on the bank. And is the extra parking, the adjusted parking, is that just to the right of that red dot?
No, I apologize. I could have shown this a little bit better. The parking is located to the south, behind the building, so it's kind of cut off. You can only see the top bit of it there. I believe there's a back lane that runs in between the two property lines, and then it's a parking lot that is owned by TD directly behind it. I believe the subject property itself there only has about 4 parking stalls or something like that, so it wouldn't be adequate for the usage. So that's why they have the additional parking lot.
Yes. And is it a separate roll number?
It is a separate roll number, and Mr. Reimer was correct when he said for 2023 we had it at 191,000. That's
Okay.
what I'm showing as well.
Okay. And it's accepted protocol between assessors and agents that this value be deducted and adjusted.
It's always on a case-by-case basis, but in this instance, it does appear to be established, and we're not going to challenge the reduction from the parking value.
Okay, I just wanted clarity. Thank you very much.
And I have no questions. Would you like to go ahead, Mr. Reimer?
Thanks, Madam Chair. And actually, there was several comments by Mr. Kupfer in response to, I think, Ms. Nesbitt's questions. And there's a lot we're agreeing on throughout. Totally agree that one has to look at capitalization rate in the context of the entire valuation. And I agree with Mr. Kupfer 100%. You can't just start, for lack of a better term, cherry picking one without taking a look at the entire stream, because certainly it's all interwoven. In this case, I guess the suggestion by Mr. Kupfer was that perhaps the rental rate that the model has kicked out is on the light side, and the capitalization rate is perhaps on the low side. I'm not entirely sure I agree with the premise. If you recall my question, Madam Chair, the one comparable with respect to this property only, this older building with a 1960s vintage building and a February 21 lease for a similar size main floor at $18.75 a foot. So I understand where Mr. Kupfer is coming from, and I agree with the statements in principle. I don't quite agree with the application in this case, but certainly agree that one must look at capitalization rate in the context of the entire valuation. So in this case, Madam Chair, what I propose to do is just to go through the valuation very briefly. There's the difference here chiefly, not entirely, but chiefly is capitalization rate. I propose, with your permission, to go through the non-recoverable study once and the capitalization rate study once, take any questions that Mr. Kupfer and the panel members may have, but then again, just for the purposes of expediting the hearing for the remainder of the docket. So if one turns to page 16, please, of our main submission. As you can see, we're actually applying a total potential market income that's just a wee bit higher than the department's model-driven rents. We're at $81,900, so it's call it $2,000 higher. It is, pardon me, it's based on a little different allocation. We're putting $20 on the main floor and $6 on the basement. But it does result in a slightly higher potential net rent, potential annual net revenue. And then we're applying the 2% vacancy that's not at issue. Neither are the parameters, I should say, for shortfall and the what we're still deeming to be the other expense, which has historically been relating to a structural reserve. Where we differ is with respect to what's been historically called a management fee. We believe that term is misleading, and we're suggesting it would relate to the non-recoverable expenses. So we're still applying 5% for that allowance for a total expense allowance of 7% versus the department's 3%, and then the capitalization rate. We're suggesting in this case 7.5%, whereas the department's got 6.75%. There is that slight difference in the associated lot. We've got 191,000 being the value on the 2023 roll. Before I get into the non-recoverable and the office capitalization rate, Mr. Whitbread had asked about the parking lot, and perhaps I'll just quickly supplement the comments of Mr. Kupfer. Mr. Kupfer's comments were bang on. If I could ask the board members and Mr. Kupfer to turn to page 8. So on page 8 of our materials, it is actually at the bottom of page 8, there's a map, and it's that property you see to the south of the subject across that lane with the 2023 assessment at 191,000. And on the top of page 9, you can see that the actual photograph of the aerial view. So that is that very same lot across the lane. So that's the lot that we're talking about. Just to tie up that particular item, if we then go to page 15, page 15 this is the printout of the assessment for that lot, confirming the value at 191,000. So notwithstanding, and Mr. Kupfer was very forthright about it, I am continuing to deduct the entire value based on the 2023 assessment of 191,000. So then with all of that being said, what I propose to do is to very, very briefly go through the non-recoverable expense study. And I'm going to take this at a very, very high level. I know that everyone's heard it many times. So Madam Chair, if you could please let me know when you've got the non-recoverable expense study available to you.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So there's a number of items that we discussed in this fairly lengthy document, but I'm going to, as I say, go through just the very highlights of it. At the bottom of page 2, first and foremost, we're suggesting that our submission is consistent with the original intent that the assessment department had with respect to this allowance. And at the bottom, second last paragraph at the bottom of page 2, this is from an earlier city assessor manual, and it states that under management, even with net leases and competent management, there'll still be expenses incurred by the landlord that are non-recoverable from the tenants. Examples of these are processing payments and chasing bad debt. So that is the concept that we're getting at, that the allowance was intended to reflect non-recoverable expenses, even where you've got triple net leases in place. And then we looked at, appraisal theory. If we might turn to page 4. And the second last paragraph on page 4, from the case studies and appraisal, it states that the appraiser should also account for non-recoverable expenses, also called non-rechargeable. The most important non-recoverable cost items to be aware of are space marketing costs, which include both tenant inducements and leasing costs, and an allowance for structural or mechanical repairs. They have the cost associated with leasing space as leasing fees or commissions, and that forms a very significant part of our analysis as well, the leasing commissions. So then skipping over to page 7, please. And the first half of that page, this is from the Saskatchewan Assessment Department's guide. And they also talk about the non-recoverable operating expenses, and they list 4 of them, 3 of which we are including in our analysis. And the 3 that we've included in this analysis that we've done are the legal and audit fees, advertising and promotion, and leasing commissions, as they set forth there. The structural repairs, as I mentioned, we're considering that to be covered off by the 2%, what's historically been known as the other allowance of 2%. Then if we go to page 10, please. So page 10 indicates the expense items that we've included in our analysis. They relate to primarily 3 and in a very few cases, 4th item. But the primary items that are included in our analysis are leasing commissions, professional fees, and advertising marketing. In just a couple of cases, there's some asset management fees, and where they were indicated, we've included those as well. Then if you turn to page 11, and I've stressed this in the past, and I stress it again, the very right-hand column is for the board's information only. We're not relying on that, those statistics, in that they include tenant inducements, and we are not including tenant inducements in our final analysis. It's rather the second from the right-hand column with the no TIs. And there, as you can see, we've got a significant range from a low of 2.6 to a high of 16.2%, with an average of 6.64 and a median of 5.98. So we believe the 5% allowance certainly would continue to be appropriate. Now then on pages 12 through 15, and I'll just speak to this if the board wishes to follow along. It starts on page 13, but the Altus capitalization rate analysis in each and every case, both for office and also for the other properties, includes the application of the full 5% allowance. If this board were inclined to reduce the 5% allowance, which is certainly within its purview to do so, it has a direct impact on our capitalization rate request in that since we've applied the full 5%, a reduction in the allowance for the purposes of our discussions concerning this assessment would have a direct impact on our capitalization rate conclusions as well. So on page 13, we've got 3 examples. All of the assumptions from top to bottom, save and except for the non-recoverable expense item, are exactly the same, right from net rent through to the indicated cap rate and the same sale price. So on page 13, we've got, with the inclusion of the full 5%, you can see there we've got a capitalization rate conclusion of 7.38%. On page 14, the only parameter we've changed, as I mentioned, is the non-recoverable expense item being reduced to 0, which had been the case with the previous assessment, and using the same assumptions, the indicated cap rate is 7.79%, which is an increase of 41 basis points. And probably the most relevant for our discussion on page 15, if the non-recoverable expense allowance is reduced from 5% to 1%, then the indicated capitalization rate is 7.71%, so roughly a 33 basis point increase. So for our purposes, what we have chosen to do is to request that if the board is inclined to reduce the non-recoverable expense from 5 to 1, consistent with the department's approach, then we would ask that the capitalization rate request be increased by 25 basis points rather than the 31 basis points, 33 basis points, but we're rounding it to 25. So with that, if I could ask the board members to turn to the capitalization rate study, please.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So and I'm going to, because I know the board members and Mr. Cupper certainly are familiar with this study. We've got 2 different sort of subsets within this study. We've got the pre-pandemic environment, and then of course the pandemic environment that we were experiencing as of the reference date. With the pre-pandemic and prior to the pandemic, of course, there was some significant changes to some of the office market, the office market in Winnipeg. And at the bottom of page 5, the Collier's cap rate report, this is the last paragraph on page 5, stated the office sector is expected to see some changes as we move through 18. Tower 1 of True North Square continues to lease up and is expected to compete in late 2018. The result of this additional office space will most likely be increased vacancy within downtown and downward pressure for rental rates for Class A buildings. Cap rates are expected to remain steady. That's only sort of peripherally relevant to the discussion that we're having this afternoon as to banks, but because both Mr. Kupfer and I are relying on an office capitalization rate analysis, I thought I would just briefly bring that up. On page 6 then, and these are again pre-pandemic capitalization rate indicators. As you can see on the chart on page 6, we've got indicators for sales in 2015 and 2018 of between 6.49% and 8.87%, as shown there. With respect to the then we move into the pandemic commentary, starting at our page 8 of the study. And again, because of the nature, and I'll stop briefly. Miss Nesbitt's, I think it was Miss Nesbitt's question with respect to how to value these properties, whether they're sort of more retail flavor or more of an office flavor. I personally struggle with the same thing. I believe you could certainly, in some cases where you've got the very large banks with huge office components, I think those are a little more clear. But where you've got the retail branches, such as most of the ones here, I believe it could just as equally be in the retail category as the office. But I have chosen, as mentioned, to go with the office analysis for the purposes of our hearing this afternoon. In the pandemic commentary, one of the key pieces of information we're bringing forth, it relates to a survey, actually 2 surveys that Altus Group had the opportunity to conduct with some of the most sophisticated real estate investors and managers in the country. And the purpose of the study was to get a sense from these investors who would be they would obviously have to be very, very aware of the circumstances and the fluidity of some of the things that were happening as it would impact their portfolio. And so there was a number of questions that we asked these folks, and the initial study was done in April of 2020, a couple of months into the pandemic, and then a follow-up study with the same questions was completed in November. And there were a number of telling comments and results from this study. At the top of page 11, there's a question as to the percentage change in face rates or market rents that they're forecasting. As you can see there, for the top quality office, significant component or proportion was suggesting no change, but there was a very, very significant number of folks that actually were predicting decreases of between 5 and even upwards of 10% in some cases. And for the lower quality office, the proportion of respondents predicting decreases of between 5 and upwards of 10% was much higher still. Then turning to page 12, of course, one of the concerns we have with respect to the capitalization rate for offices generally and the classifying the bank buildings as office components, it would apply to them as well, relates to cap rate expectations. And as you can see, for the respondents that were responding to this question as to what their cap rate expectations were for the higher quality office, they did expect rates to the majority, I should say, of the respondents predicted cap rates increases of between 25 and 50 basis points, with some also a significant number, roughly 22, 23%, suggesting it may be even as high as between 50 and 75 basis points. And for the lower quality office, a much higher proportion were predicting cap rate increases of between 50 and 75 basis points, a significant number between 25 and 50, and then again, others again who are predicting between 75 and 100 basis points as well. So with those capitalization rate trends in mind, if we go to page 16, and these are transactions then that were occurring within the pandemic in 2 cases, and in 1 case just prior to it. As you can see there, the capitalization rates that we've calculated are between 6.97% to 7.66% in the case of these transactions. So our conclusions on page 17 for suburban office, which is effectively what these properties amount to, the suburban office rates were suggesting between 6.25 and 7.5%. So with respect to then the subject, I am admittedly at the high end of that range. I took a look at the building age and the rental information that I've got, and I believe that the 7.5% rate would be appropriate. Now, having said that, and if you recall, Madam Chair, my question to Mr. Kupfer related to the one comparable closest in age, if one looked at this property in isolation, the land to building ratio is only, and I'm rounding it off at 1.8 to 1, but with the deduction of that associated parking lot, that then provides sufficient parking for the subject. So I'll be very blunt. If this board were inclined to go something in the 7 to 7.25 range, given that the parking lot has been deducted, that to me would also stand to reason and would reflect the age, location of the subject, but also reflect the fact that with that associated lot, there is indeed sufficient parking for the subject. So with those comments, I would ask that the board consider our request to reduce the value to a total assessment of $793,000. And that's my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kupfer, do you have questions for Mr. Reimer?
Just a couple quick ones. Thank you. Wanted to confirm from your office capitalization rate study before we move on here. So we're both saying we're going to consider OFS properties to be our most comparable cap rates for these banks. Is that correct?
Agreed. Yeah.
None of the banks that we're discussing today are anywhere near really the downtown area. So suburban office fits reasonably well, correct?
Absolutely, Mr. Kupfer. It's suburban office, and I'd suggest suburban office would be impacted by the pandemic along with downtown office, but agreeing with you, that downtown commentary, that would sort of have more application to the central business district, without question.
Okay. I'm looking at your comparables table provided on page 13. I'm only seeing I'm assuming these are all bank properties?
I'm sorry, on the main brief now?
I'm on your main brief page.
Okay, yeah.
Yes.
Yes, these are all indeed, these are all bank leases, yeah.
Bank or credit union?
Oh, I'm sorry, yes, financial institution, yes.
Fair enough.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm only seeing one rent here that's below $20 a foot, and then one rent at $20 a foot. Is that correct?
Indeed.
Okay. Do you know if any of these have basement space or anything included in them, similar to the subject?
These are all the rents that have been calculated, Mr. Kupfer, are all based on main floor area only. So if the basement is included in there, I haven't included that in the leasable area that I'm aware of. It's the main floor area that I focused on.
Okay. So in your workup then on page 16, you've, as you stated, you're using the high end of your capitalization rates at 7.5%. And then we're also using the low end of the rental rates at about $20 a foot based on the comparables provided from both of our briefs. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So those decisions, are those based primarily on the age of the building, the 1961 age of the building?
It is based on, yeah, age was definitely a factor, as well as location, taking into account though that associated parking lot, which is hence my comments that 7.5 on reflection seems a little bit high.
The location's a bit of an interesting one for a bank. This is located right on the corner of Notre Dame and Sherbrooke. My understanding is it would get a lot of traffic. Are you considering this a less than average location? Are you making an adjustment for this location? Can you speak to that at all?
I'm not making an adjustment. I would agree with you. There's a lot of traffic. I'm not sure in the scheme of things, Mr. Kupfer, that Notre Dame and Sherbrooke would be considered for what amounts to a retail branch would be considered a premium location. But yes, I'm agreeing with you. It's definitely high traffic, no question.
Okay. I think that's all the questions I have, Madam Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Nesbitt, do you have any questions?
I do not have any questions. Thank you.
Mr. Whitbread?
I have none, thank you.
And I don't have any questions. Any need for summary? Mr. Kupfer?
None for me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to number 2, that's 588 Sargent. And I believe that we do have a preliminary issue with this particular property. Mr. Kupfer?
That's correct. This is one of the properties where the income and expense mailer wasn't returned. So we're requesting non-cooperation on this property.
And do you have any evidence to present on that subject?
Yes, just page 17 of my brief, right to the end, has the Canada Post tracking information. So this is what gets attached with the second mailer, right? We send out our first mailer just through regular post, and the second one is registered and tracked. So this is from the second mailer. Unfortunately, this is during COVID, so most of these aren't signed, as Canada Post wasn't insisting on signatures for them. But it is showing that it was delivered. This is an RBC branch. I'd expect them to get their mail. I have a hard time believing that they didn't, but this is where we're at here. We don't have a signature, but we're showing that it's delivered. Nothing was returned. And that's what I know about it.
Thank you. Do you have comments, Mr. Reimer?
I'm just looking at the tracking number to me. Yeah, and they do match up. I have no reply.
You have no reply? All right. Do you have any questions, Ms. Nesbitt?
Okay, so the item number on this evidence on page 17, what does that correspond to? Does that correspond to the item number for in the assessment records? Like how do we know this is the property? It has no address on it. So I'm just trying to understand it a little better.
Yeah, no, the item number is that's Canada Post number. That doesn't relate to a roll number or anything like that we use, unfortunately.
Okay.
you're right. That would be a much better indicator if we were able to say address, roll number, tracking
Yeah.
number all together, on one form.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, then I have no questions. Thank you.
Mr. Whitford?
None for this discussion. Thank you.
And I have no questions, and we'll take a short recess. Thank you. Thank you. Call the hearing back to order, and after review, the panel has determined that the city's request for non-cooperation will be granted. So that puts the onus on you, Mr. Reimer, and you can go ahead at any time.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Could I ask again that the questions, comments on the non-recoverable and cap rate be carried forward?
Perfect.
And then if we might move to our main submission, starting just briefly at page 2. So this is the RBC at 588 Sargent. It's got a main floor area of 4,378 square feet plus basement, lot area of 6,222 square feet. And the request this afternoon is to reduce the 2023 assessment to a value of $1,223,000. If we then move to skip forward, please, to page 8. And there's a street view of the subject and a map underneath that shows the location at the corner of Sargent and Sherbrooke. And again, at page 9 at the top, the overhead map showing the lot outline. As you can see there, the land area, the building occupies virtually all the land area. There is no parking available within this roll number. So then if we move to page 13, please. And again, the comparables that are listed there are the one and the same for all of the properties on the docket this afternoon. The bank is an owner occupant in this case, so there's no contract rents in place. So we looked at the bank space, and as Mr. Kupfer has set out in his presentation, our analysis or our review was based on looking at a number of different locations, ages, trying to get a sense of where the rental rates generally were coming in. Most of the rental rates, as shown on the chart there, were in very good retail. And again, this gets back to the retail office discussion. Most of these, as you can see by these addresses, are in good quality retail locations. And for the purposes of these types of banking operations, that's certainly where they want to be. Then we've got some basement rents at the bottom of page 13 as well. So in the case of the subject, then, if we go to page 14, the rental rate that we're calculating for the main floor space is 4,378 square feet at 19.25, which is again at the low end of the range. We are applying $6 on the basement for a total potential rent of $105,367. And if we turn then to page 15, the common elements, what you'll see in Mr. Kupfer's presentation, the common elements relate to the rental rate is virtually the same. The 2% vacancy allowance, the differences again being 5% for non-recoverables and a 7.75% capitalization rate. That capitalization rate request is based upon the older, or I didn't speak to this, but the older age of the subject. The property was constructed in 1965, and of course, as I mentioned, the complete lack of parking on the site. Therefore, on page 15, what you can see is with the 7.75% rate coming in at a request this afternoon of $1,223,000. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any questions, Mr. Kupfer? I think you're muted.
No questions. Thank you.
Ms. Nesbitt.
I'm sorry, Mr. Reimer, could you please explain again, and I apologize for this, why you went outside Altus's cap rate range? I just note that the other property was a 1961 / effective year 63, and you used a 7.5. This is slightly newer, not so much, but slightly. Is it just the parking that's driving that?
It is. Your question, Ms. Nesbitt, is a very fair one, and it would relate to my analysis with respect to the lack of parking. 7.5% would make perfect sense to me. quite bluntly. Because that is, and you've identified it exactly right, that is at the upper end of our range, at the 7.5%.
Right.
If I could just have a minute, I'm going to actually change that, because when I looked at this now and the range, that's a very fair question. So if I capitalize 94,768 at 7.5, the revised value, and I'm going to round it upwards, is 1,264,000.
Thank you, Mr. Reimer. No further questions.
Mr. Whitbird.
Is there any office space in that basement at 3,500 square feet?
You know, quick answer is I do not know. I've treated, for the purposes of these hearings, I've treated the basement as basically as having office finish at using the $6 rate. There's very finished office basement rents are few and far between, and not particularly easy to find. I do, at the bottom of my page 13, and again, this is where there is basement space. This is going to be common to all of those submissions. We've got 3 basement rents, and these are basement rents for office uses, and they're between $7 and $8. So based on, and you can see there at the bottom of page 13, they range from call it 2,800 square feet up to just under 6,000 feet. And so based upon that and the size that was the subject at 3,515 feet, I use the $6 rate. So on the assumption that there will be some office use in it.
I understand. So is it fair to say if it was substandard unfinished, you would likely have a lower rate in the $4 range?
I would.
Okay, I appreciate that clarification. Thank you. No further questions, Madam Chair.
My questions have been asked and answered. Okay, Mr. Comfort, we can go ahead with your presentation.
Thank you, and it'll be a pretty brief one. This property is extremely similar to the last one that we discussed, with the exception of the parking issue. It's like Mr. Reimer said, a 1965 one-story RBC. We're located right on the corner of Sherbrooke and Sargent, so we're effectively 1 block south, the last property that we discussed. It's in the parking lot of a Freshco, I believe, so that's where users of the bank likely park. I don't know if there's an agreement in place or exactly how they work that out, but I believe that's how the parking issue is resolved. Looking at page 5 of my brief, our income summary here, the model generated values appear to be extremely close and similar to what we just saw, with our rents coming in on the lower end at a little over $20 a foot, plus about $4 for the storage basement space, vacancy expenses and shortfall, all standard per our model here at 2%, 3%, and $8. And the capitalization rate selected by the model here, I believe, is 0.1% higher than the last property that we discussed, which I think would vaguely correspond to those couple of years being newer, moving from 6.75 to 6.85. So again, I see this as a very reasonable total assessment that the model is coming to at $1,441,000. And I'd like to recommend that value be maintained. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Reimer, do you have a question?
Madam Chair, could I ask the questions and comments on the non-recoverable and specifically the capitalization rate be carried forward?
Correct.
No further questions. Thank you.
Ms. Nesbitt.
Mr. Comfort, can I just ask for some clarification? You said a higher cap rate for this property compared to the other one of 0.10. And you said because it's newer?
Yeah, I believe.
Isn't that intuitively backwards? Like, sorry, am I missing something? It's a newer property. Wouldn't it have a lower cap rate?
No, you're right. That could very well be. I was just speaking to the very slight difference I can see is also there's a very slight difference in age. But you're right, intuitively that would work the other way. A newer building would have a lower cap and a higher value. You're right.
Okay, so why, if it's so close in proximity, you said about a block further south,
yes.
Why would the model assign a different cap rate?
Well, I see it as being, like I said, very close. Why it's 0.1 off like that.
Yeah.
I can't say my first thought there was the slight age difference, but you definitely checked me on that, and that probably wouldn't be correct in this instance. So
Yeah.
slightly the location. It's also a bit different in size, I think, or at least area is slightly different.
Mhm.
What the best I can offer, but in terms of our rates here, both the rental rate and the capitalization rate, they're very close for two very
Yes.
similar properties as I see them. The TD and the RBC banks here, very close.
Oh, okay. Okay, I didn't want to belabor it. I didn't understand that. So thank you for that clarification, and I have no additional questions, Madam Chair.
Mr. Whitbread.
I'll just take it a little bit further. Is it possible that cap rate could be a result of no parking on the property? That higher cap rate declines the value?
I think that's a reasonable, logical step to make. Would our model, our computer-assisted mass appraisal model, make that deduction? I'm not sure if it would, but I think you're correct in making that that association.
Okay, thank you. That is the leap I would make. Thank you very much. No further questions.
So, Mr. Cuffer, you're suggesting that the model does not take those kinds of characteristics into consideration? Like that, would that not be one of the characteristics that they would be entered, parking, availability of parking or not? You'd think?
I don't know. I'm not prepared to comment on that. I don't
Okay.
think our mass appraisal model there would factor the land to building area into tie that into the cap rates. I don't know. That's a tough one.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions. Is there any need to summarize?
None for me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to number 3, which is 121 Disraeli Freeway. Mr. Cupper, you can go ahead. You're ready?
This is file number 22-3511, roll number 13096054000. Street address is 121 Disraeli Freeway. This is another owner-occupied bank/credit union. This one's Assiniboine Credit Union. It's a 2-story building constructed in 2006 with a total leasable area of 6,135 square feet, spread between the main floor and the second floor. We have a 2023 model-driven assessment of $2,309,000 using the income approach that I'll be recommending be maintained today. Page 2 of my brief shows some photos of the subject property. Like I said, located on the Disraeli Freeway, just off Main Street. If you're heading towards Henderson Highway, you'll drive right past this. It's a 2006 building, so it does stand out pretty well. And like most of these newer buildings, it's got, as you can see, the drive-through ATM service and that sort of thing. Looks to have plenty of parking on site here. We have no recent sales, and like I said, owner-occupied, so no subject lease. So we are relying on our comparables. Again, both myself and Mr. Reimer provided pretty good sample sizes here, bank comparables for your reference. Page 5 of my brief shows my income model workup here. So we have 6,135 square feet total. Like I said, split between 2 floors. If I have this right, it's about 3/4 on the main floor and 1/4 upstairs. I have about 4,600 square feet on the main floor out of the total 6,100 square feet. So I'd put it at about 3/4 on the main and then 1/4 upstairs. That being said, it's being modeled all together with our B1 bank credit union finish here at $30.46. About $10 a foot higher than the last 2 properties that we've seen. This is, like I said, a 2006 building, so it's quite a bit different from the 1960s 1-story banks that we've been looking at. Everything else, like I've said here, is driven by the model, our 2% vacancy, 3% expenses, an $8 shortfall, and for a reason I haven't quite figured out yet, a 7.65% capitalization rate on this 2006 bank. And that is deriving our value of $2,309,000. Like I said, to Assiniboine Credit Union, they own it, they occupy it, so we have no rents. They did return all their income and expense information to us, so no issues there. And they included the COVID questionnaire pretty consistent with what we've seen from other banks, increased cleaning costs, plastic shields / dividers, that sort of thing. No significant changes to tenancy or anything like that. That's about what I know about the property. Like I said, we're going to recommend that $2,309,000 be maintained. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Reimer, you have a question?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Mr. Kupfer, this may not be a fair question, and please understand I'm speculating a little, but in the mass appraisal model, does it, if physical characteristics are known and entered, is it possible that would impact the model, the capitalization rate that the model would generate, or do you not know? If you don't know, that's fine.
Would the physical characteristics that are entered impact the capitalization?
Yeah, like if there's specific negative characteristics peculiar to a given property, deficiencies, call it. And if someone was aware of that, and if they entered it into the system, would that generate a higher capitalization rate? And if you don't know, that's okay. Because I am speculating a little.
Yeah, I'm not prepared to take a stab on that.
Okay, fair enough. Okay. Could we turn to your page 4, please?
Yes.
And you've alluded to this, so on the rental comparisons, what we've got then for these comparisons, we've got 2 being the last one and the third last one. Those are the 2 comparables that are rents over 2 stories, correct? Or 2 levels.
Yeah, I have them labeled comp 6 and comp 8 on my table there.
Indeed, comp 6 and comp 8. Okay. And in the case of your last comp, that I'm going to suggest you would be similar in 3 respects. It's closest in age at 1997. It's also on 2 levels, and it's also actually 4 similarities: the age, the fact it's on 2 levels, the lease start date closest to the reference date, and the size of 6,100 square feet. Those I'd suggest to you of the comparables here would be closest in terms of the characteristics to the subject. Would that be fair?
I'd agree with that. I'll even give you one more, Mr. Reimer. This 900 Harrow, it's about 2/3 to 1/3 main floor to upper, and I think the subject is about 3/4 to 1/4 main floor to upper. So again, fairly similar in that regard.
Okay, appreciate that. And that rent that the department's got is at I take it the $23 is the overall blended rent for the entire space, correct?
It is. I've represented this property, so they don't allot separate amounts to separate areas. They're using $23 for their main floor and their upper. That's obviously an averaged out rent that they've worked out for the area.
Were you having trouble hearing?
You know what? You lost me on the last little bit. I couldn't quite hear you.
Oh, sorry about that. Yes, they occupy the main and the upper area, but they don't allot separate rents to them. They're using $23 as an averaged out for both the upper and main.
Okay. And you've alluded to a quick question there. The entire parameters set out on your page 5, it's all model driven, correct?
I believe so. I didn't personally alter any of it. Yeah.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Those are my questions.
Thank you. Ms. Nesbitt.
I have no questions. Thank you.
Mr. Whitfred.
Yes, I may be asking the same thing, but looking for clarification that if you have a 2-story building, would someone not input the parameters for the 2nd story, which is probably not retail, it would be office, and that you would then come up with an office versus retail rent? I'm sorry if that's the same question, but I don't quite understand.
Excellent question. And in fact, another property that
You need your mic, Mr. Kupfer. Sorry.
It's an excellent question. In fact, one of the bank properties later in our docket is modeled in the exact way that you described there, where we have 2 different premise IDs, one for the main floor and then one I think is mezzanine upper area with 2 different rates. For whatever reason, how this one was entered, it was entered with just 1 rate, all being classified as bank over those 2 stories.
Okay, so, and then no explanation because you don't know how the model was built, so I understand that. Okay, that's my question. Thank you.
I believe my questions have been asked and answered.
Thank-
Mr. Reimer, I think.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Trying to remember where I am now.
Let's return to our main submission, please, and turn to page 8 initially. So again, this is a street view of the subject. It is, and Mr. Kupfer's the general split is bang on. It's roughly 3/4 main and then 1/4 office in very sort of round figures, $1,500 square feet of second floor space, and then roughly 45, just over 40, actually 4,600 square feet on the main. We have valued, as you'll see in a minute, we valued it using a separate rent for the main floor space, which we consider to be the retail banking operations, and the second floor office space. And our valuation reflects that distinction. So at the bottom of page 8, then, this is the what was formerly the Integra Credit Union. Now, as the merger was ACU, it's now an Assiniboine Credit Union at the corner of Lilly Street and Disraeli. Just north of Alexander Avenue. As you can see at the bottom of page 8, sort of that interchange there. Top of page 9, then we've got the aerial view of the subject. Now, at the bottom of page 9, I talk about the property description, and my reason for asking the question of Mr. Kupfer relating to the capitalization rate is we have been advised in the past that there are structural issues associated with the building. There is a dispute that's arisen due to that, so I'm not able to provide further details other than to just quote the estimated cost for remediating the deficiencies. As you can see at the bottom of page 9, are between $300,000 and $350,000. That is purely based on the information I've been given without specific details of it. I have no reason to question that information. I believe it was well grounded, but I can't provide the board with specific quotes relating to the work that needs to be done because of the ongoing discussions between the owner and the individuals involved. So the main floor area is 4,636 square feet, which is actually 75.6% of the total area. And the second floor office is 1,499 square feet. So just a wee bit under 25%. Moving into our page 13. Same lease comparables, as you can see there, with a range of between $1,450 at the low end to $33 at the high end. This property has the advantage of being somewhat newer construction, and certainly we're picking a retail banking rent at the upper end of the range. It's possibly some locational challenges with it, so we haven't gone to the top end of the range, notwithstanding the age of the building. But we did conclude that a $30 rate for the retail banking space of call it 45 or 4,600 square feet was appropriate, and certainly fits well within the data that we can see on page 13. The distinction then, if we go to page 14, we have, as I mentioned, valued the second floor space using Class B office. The closest comparable, we believe, or analogy, I should say, would be Class B office space. And as you can see there, we've got a number of Class B office rents in the downtown area, ranging from $10.01 a square foot at the low end to $15 at the high end. And what we then concluded at the bottom of page 14 is that the second floor space would likely command a rent of $14 a square foot, sort of in the mid range of those comparables. And as I say, the main floor rent at $30 a square foot. And that results then in a total potential market rent for this entire area, a blended rent of $26.09. Recall, Madam Chair, and Mr. Kupfer was very forthright in his response. Recall my questioning relating to the premise at 900 Harrow Street, where the blended rate was $23 a square foot, slightly different configuration, but not far off, was a 2/3, 1/3 split between main floor and second floor, and that rate being $23. My rate with a slightly higher proportion of main floor space being $26. So certainly I'd suggest you it's all very, very consistent. So then working it through on page 16, in this particular case, we have applied the same capitalization rate as the department. I'm suggesting, because of the structural deficiencies that are known, and I'm anticipating Ms. Nesbitt's question, and again, it would be a fair one. We have got beyond the 7.5%, and in this case, though, as opposed to the previous one, It's based on what we perceive to be some fairly significant physical issues, and have applied a rate that's consistent with the department, using that blended rent of $26.09 based on $30 on Main and $14 on Second. As you can see there, we come in at a requested value of $1,894,000. Thank you.
Great. Mr. Kupfer, do you have questions for Mr. Reimer?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Ms. Nesbitt?
I have no questions because Mr. Reimer answered my question. Thank you, Mr. Reimer.
Mr. Whitbread?
I don't, but I would like to redirect a question to the assessor, if you don't mind.
Sure, go ahead.
Nathan, I'm looking at the ratio of 5.48. And I know we've talked about in the past 4.0 being a point of needing an adjustment to land value. You've chosen not to make any adjustment in this case. Can you explain why?
In terms of not adding additional value for the surplus of land, is that the question?
Yep.
I'm not sure I can give you a comprehensive answer there, only to suggest that I don't believe there's any, I don't see any way this land would be proportioned or split or cut in a way that the credit union would want to actually separate this and sell it off and turn it into two parcels, or a way to commodify this separately from the bank, or to have it as a separate part of their operations. So while you're right that they certainly do have plenty of parking, and that's a nice perk to have, in this instance, I think it would be pretty uncommon to see the department look at adding additional value for the land.
So you couldn't see a slicing up of that land of the bottom end of the triangle, the left side of the triangle, and making it a parking lot, for example.
Yeah. So I'm looking at page 2 as well here of the brief, where it's got a pretty good overhead view. And it's definitely a bit of an unusual shape within the lot there. And I'm also looking at the access points just off of Disraeli. Yeah, I think they would have a tough time cutting this one up and trying to find two separate uses here for the land. Nice to have the excess parking for sure. I understand it's a pretty big building, but yeah, no additional land value for that. All of that being said, I am recommending that our assessment be maintained today.
Thank you. No further questions, Madam Chair.
I have only one small question, and would it be fair to say that this is a little bit more difficult to access than the ones on the main street, given the location on Disraeli?
It is. Accesses, I mean, you can access it off Disraeli heading, that would be heading north. North and east, I guess.
East, yeah.
But so in that direction, it's fine. But otherwise, coming from the other direction, it's difficult. So my quick answer that way would be yes. I would like to also comment to Mr. Whitbread's question, and indeed, given the configuration of this lot and the location of it, the access, and especially now when you're talking about a triangular lot, notwithstanding that the 5.8 would appear to be a high land to building ratio, I'd suggest there's just no feasible way to slice and dice a lot like this to have another have any excess, any use beyond what the credit union would require within this configuration. It just wouldn't be possible to viably, I don't think, try and segment a parcel out and have an independent development on it. So that would be my only additional question. Thank you. Or comment.
Thank you. Any wish to summarize?
None for me, thank you.
Sorry?
No summary, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to number 4, 1335 Jefferson Avenue. Do we have any issues? You can go ahead. Mr. Kupfer, when you're ready.
This is file number 22-3512. Roll number is 050045655500. The street address is 1335 Jefferson Avenue. Like the last property we discussed, this is an owner-occupied Assiniboine credit union. Again, 2 stories in height. This one was constructed in 2001 and has a total leasable area of 10,456. I don't have the breakdown for you for size off the top of my notes here. We've got a 2023 model-driven assessment using the income approach of $4,488,000. Page 2 of my brief shows you some pretty good photos of our subject property. So we are on the corner of Jefferson and Adsum Drive, just south of Leela. We have, similar to the other properties, no recent sales to make our jobs easy here. And as it is owner occupied, again, we are basing our assessment here off of market comparables. I provided all of the same assessment comparables for you, showing that range of bank properties. So like I said, 10,456 square feet. Is being modeled at $27.94. So again, this is over 2 stories, but we're not breaking it out as 2 separate stories. It's just getting that one value. 2% vacancy loss, 3% expenses, and $8 shortfall. And in this case, our capitalization rate is making a bit more sense here at 6.15% for a nice new bank property. And that is what's deriving our value here of $4,488,000. I've included the income and expense information as submitted. They are fully in compliance, confirming for us that it is fully owner occupied. Expenses are submitted, and the COVID questionnaire lists the familiar issues: increased cleaning costs, plastic shields, and dividers. No significant change in tenancy or anything like that for an owner occupied bank. So we are going to recommend that our model assessment here, $4,488,000, be maintained today. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any questions, Mr. Reimer?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Kupfer, I don't know if your notes have it, but I'll just ask the question and I'll confirm it in my presentation. But in rough terms, in the case of the subject, we're talking about roughly 55% of the total area on the main floor and just roughly 45% on the second floor, correct?
I believe that to be correct, yes.
Okay, so in this particular case, we've got obviously a much higher proportion of second floor space. Again, going just briefly to your page 4. So the closest analogy in terms of age and the configuration with this 2-story would be comparable number 8 at a blended rate of $23 a foot based on that information, correct?
Given that it has 2 stories, that's what's familiar there, yes.
And Madam Chair, if I could, previous questions asked and answered on the remaining materials, thank you.
Ms. Nesbitt, do you have any questions?
Yes, I do. I think I do. So just to confirm, did you say about 55% was on the main level and 45% on the second level, or do I have that backwards?
That's correct.
Okay, so a little bit more on the main than the second. You just use the one rate. The rates that you used were higher, quite a bit higher than the 2-story comps that you have, comp 6 and comp 8. Can you tell me why? Is that a reflection of the age of the property?
It's a fair question. It is newer, of course. Other than that, I mean, it's kind of difficult to say. Everything here is being modeled at our bank rates. If we were to split this out, like I said, you'd have a smaller area for the bank area. It would produce a slightly higher value. Our model would probably kick out something like $30 to $32. And then the upper area would be modeled quite a bit lower, probably not far from what Mr. Reimer's presented, and like at $15 to $18 rate, depending on the quality of the finish. Yeah, and then you would average it out from there essentially. So in this case, I think I can even have a recommendation on this one because we probably are a bit. high given the 6.15 cap rate. I would consider a net operating income on this one probably closer to what the applicants used, looking at around 230,000. And then I would lean more towards our cap rates, probably call it 6.25. That would be about 3,680,000 for this property.
And I'm sorry, that's using the NOI that the Mr. Reimer used, correct?
Yeah.
Or did you just round it to something else?
I rounded it to 230. I think Mr. Reimer's at 229 and change. He's using $32 a foot for the bank space, which is maybe slightly low for the main, but I think it's 15 for the second, probably averages that out. We don't quite agree on the expenses. Obviously, he uses 7% expenses. We use 3%, so that would bump your net operating income a little bit higher. And I don't really see any reason to cap this anywhere near 7%, so I would call it 6.25. So very roughly speaking, I think you'd be looking at around 230,000 plus a bit of change maybe for the NOI, and then I would cap it at around 6.25, and that would bring you to your assessed value of just under 3.7 million. And that would be my recommendation for this property, as I could see it being a little bit over assessed here based on the rates that we're using.
Sorry, so just to clarify, that value is about 3,680,000 then?
That's what I came to just roughly here using 230,000 NOI and a 6.25 cap rate.
Okay. All right. Mr. Whitford, do you have any questions?
Well, I'm just curious if that's going to be accepted.
Okay. Mr. Reimer, what's your feeling on that recommendation?
So I can't formally accept because I don't have instructions, but I have to say I'm pretty comfortable with this suggestion, because after I make my cap rate adjustment at my end, because of that distinction I talked about with the non-recoverable. So when you factor that in, now we're getting very close. So I can't formally accept, and I ask my presentation stand, but I will say on what Mr. Kupfer is saying makes a lot of sense to me.
Okay.
So I do have a question.
All right.
For the assessor, if you don't mind, Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
And I'm sure he anticipates this coming. I'm looking at the ratio of 7.82. I see you smiling. Now, this is a very different configuration on land, and yet I see no adjustment to the land value based on that 7.82. Can you comment, please, Mr. Cup?
It is a high land to building ratio. It looks like they got plenty of room for drive-through ATM service, surplus of parking, parking for their office staff, parking for their bank staff, parking for bank customers. It's great to have. To my knowledge, they don't have any interest in parceling this out. I haven't seen any notes or reviewed anything stating that we've considered that in this case. As it stands, it's just an Assiniboine credit union with an excess amount of parking, and it's nice to have that for your market value.
And yet in other cases, we've observed that the model will take that into consideration and factor that excess land and make an adjustment. You're saying that did not happen in this case. Was there an adjustment to reflect that, or the model just didn't do it?
To my knowledge, Mr. Whitbread, those adjustments that are made for surplus land to add additional land value, those are manual adjustments where we've reviewed a property and we've said this is clearly surplus land. It looks like it intends to be parceled out. It can be used for other things. We've looked at the configuration, those types of things, and then we manually make that input. I don't believe that the model will automatically do that. So by and large part, these types of properties won't have that type of adjustment unless somebody's gone in and confidently been able to say, yes, this is breakable land. Yes, they could parcel this out and sell it. Yes, we're going to add that additional land. It's not something that we do very often or do lightly. And I don't believe it's something that the model will automatically apply, because that could get us in a lot of trouble if it were to be done improperly.
Well, thank you for that. I don't recall anyone ever telling me that, giving me that information. So that's good to know. Thank you. No further questions.
Madam Chair, could I respond to that? Because it's really important.
Sure.
Mr. Whitbread, your question obviously is a very good one, but I'm going to suggest this. It would not be feasible in this case when you look at the land to building ratio to parcel out a piece. And the reason is this. Don't forget now that we're dealing virtually with a two-story building. We're not just dealing with a one-story retail bank with some office. We're dealing with a very substantial amount of office space on the second floor, a total area that is very substantial at 10,000, call it 10,500 square feet. And when you start going vertical with these improvements, you immediately obviously need a lot more parking. So very, very different situation when you're looking at land to building ratios, which is the plan area to the land. That's all well and good, but you have to look at the vertical aspect of it as well with the building and how many square feet of building area you've got. You know, just by extension, if you've got a 3 or 4 story building, those parking requirements for those tenants are going to increase. And that absolutely is what's, in my respectful opinion, what's conclusive here is you've got fundamentally what amounts to very close to a 2-story building, and Integra would, or Cinnabon Credit Union, I should say, would not consider parceling out any component of this land, because then they wouldn't have sufficient parking for their employees that are all working on the second floor. So I did want to respond to that comment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I have no further questions. Do you want to make the presentation? No, we'll go ahead. Okay. To number 5, 1083 McPhillips.
And Madam Chair, to the extent that it helped to expedite things, again, we're simply seeking confirmation under 54.1.
Okay. Panel, do you have any questions? Mr. Cuffer, do you have any questions around that for seeking confirmation?
No questions.
Panel?
None.
No questions. We should probably read it into the record though first.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, sorry.
Mr. Cuffer, will you please read this one into the record for us?
This is file number 22-3123, roll number 14051782 000. The street address is 1083 McPhillips Street. This is a BMO bank property built in 2008, all on 1 story, leasable area 5,435 square feet, and a model-driven assessment of $2,104,000 that we'll be recommending be maintained. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, we need you to read the assessment year, sorry, Mr. Cuffer.
That's a 2023 assessment of $2,104,000.
Thank you very much. Moving on to item number 6. This is 2260. I believe I'm going to ask you to read this one into the roll. I believe there's a preliminary issue, but if you are requesting confirmation.
Exactly, yes, exactly right, yeah.
Okay, so could you read this into the roll for us, Mr. Cuffer?
This is file number 22-2405, roll number 0500934730. The street address is 2260 McPhillips Street. This is a CIBC bank built in 1998, all on 1 story, leasable area of 6,138 square feet, and a 2023 model-driven assessment of $2,419,000 that we're recommending be maintained. Thank you.
Mr. Cupford, you have an option here to either present the non-co-op issue or to withdraw it because it has no bearing on this value or the future of it.
We'll withdraw the request for non-co-op
Okay.
as the value is being confirmed by the applicant.
Thank you. Moving on to item number 7, 2350 McPhillips. I believe this one also has a preliminary issue.
So similar to the other preliminary issue we've discussed today, I've attached the Canada Post form as page 17 of my brief here. Again, just showing that the second mailer, the registered mailer, was delivered per Canada Post July 14th, 2021. No signature is available, and we're requesting that the non-cooperation be applied in this instance. Thank you.
Mr. Reimer, do you have any comments?
No reply.
No reply. Are there any questions from the panel?
No.
No questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. I have no questions. We'll recess shortly. Thank you very much. Call the hearing back to order. On review, the panel has determined that we will grant the non-co-op request of the city. So, Mr. Reimer, you can go ahead when you're ready.
Thanks, Madam Chair. If I then could ask the board members and Mr. Kupfer to turn in our submission to page 8 initially, please. So this is the Royal Bank branch located at 2350 McPhillips Street. This is another one where it's on 2 levels. It's in very rough terms, 2/3 main floor space and 1/3 second floor space. The second floor doesn't cover the entire area. It's located at the corner of McPhillips Street and Court Avenue. Turning to page 9, then you can see the overhead. So this was the improvements were constructed in 1992, and as I indicate there, then with more precise calculations, the main floor area represents 64.6% of the total leasable, and the second floor area of 4,301 square feet is 35.4% of the total leasable. Land area is 26,479 square feet. If I could then turn, and I'm going to cut to the heart of the matter, Madam Chair. If I could ask the board members and Mr. Kupfer to turn to our page 16. On our page 16, we've got actually a potential market rent that is slightly higher than the model-driven rent that the department's got. It's in, and again, I'm going to speak in rough terms. It's about $5,000 higher that we're applying. However, I'm cognizant of the comments this afternoon and the evidence presented by Mr. Kupfer. My suggestion is going to be this. Notwithstanding the request that I've made at $3,134,000, as you can see on page 16, my suggestion is going to be to apply a revised NOI of $224,156. That then we would calculate it by different means, but it is the department's NOI. We would actually calculate that using the 5%, but again with a higher rent. So in any event, I'm suggesting the revised NOI of $224,156 and a capitalization rate of 6.75%. So if the board might make note to please amend my request to $3,321,000 based on those revisions. Thank you.
Do you have any questions, Mr. Kupfer?
The upstairs area, Mr. Reimer, can you comment to its usage? Is that all office space, or?
I have treated it all as office. I haven't personally inspected, but I am treating it as office on the second floor. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Nesbitt, do you have a question?
I have no questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And Mr. Whitbread?
I have none, thank you.
And I have no questions. Mr. Kupfer?
This is file number 22-1801, roll number 0500917430. Street address is 2350 McPhillips Street. This is, as Mr. Reimer stated, an owner-occupied Royal Bank of Canada building. 2 stories, constructed in 1992, total leasable area of a little over 12,000 square feet. And our model-driven assessment using the income approach for 2023 is $3,530,000. Page 2 of my brief shows similar photographs to the ones provided by Mr. Reimer. Page 3 of the brief again shows no leases and no recent sales to make our jobs easier. Page 4 of the brief shows the same comparables you've been looking at all afternoon. Page 5 of my brief, our interesting page here. So like Mr. Whitbread touched on earlier, we've got two different premise IDs actually in place for this property. And my question to Mr. Reimer was about the usage of the second floor there, because we're actually using a storage / mezz rate, which I think is probably going to undercut our actual office value here. It's only using $11.91, which to my knowledge is a little bit low even for second floor space. But all that being said, the NOI that's being produced here is not too far out of whack. I think at 224,156. We've got a capitalization rate of 6.35%. Again, it's a 1997 building, so I'm expecting that cap rate to come in a little bit on the lower end. And then that estimated market value, like I've said, $3,530,000 that I'm recommending be maintained. The income and expense information wasn't filled out as we covered. That's why we requested the non-co-op, so I can't speak to any COVID impacts or expenses or anything like that. So that's all the information I have on the subject property. And again, I'm recommending the modeled assessment be maintained. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Reimer, do you have any questions for me?
No further questions on what's been asked and answered.
Ms. Nesbitt, do you have a question?
I have no questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Whitbread?
And I have none. Thank you.
And I have no questions. You have now heard all of the items scheduled, and this hearing is now adjourned.
Thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.